My name is Ben McShane-Jewell. I'm with the University of Nebraska Extension, and I'm here with Erin and Margaret. And Erin's from the Center for Rural Affairs. She'll introduce herself, and Margaret's going to present on the SNAP stuff a little bit later from Buy Fresh, Buy Local. So let them do their introductions a little bit later on. So we are here as part of a team that's just launched this year a project, Farmers Market Promotion Program grant from the USDA, and we are focusing on rural farmers markets this year across the state of Nebraska and providing kind of these series of trainings. It's a 3-year project, so this is year 1. So this is kind of our first round of trainings, and we're kind of, had to pivot a little bit this year, had intended to do these in person, would have loved to be in person with you all and kind of doing it that way, but we're making the best of it. So really appreciate you all jumping on. Down the road, we plan to create the resources that will kind of come out of these trainings will form a kind of a farmers market toolkit that we'll be able to share with everyone. We're going to have a good website full of resources. So lots of stuff to follow up with and videos and things like that. So please feel free afterwards to suggest things, or like I said earlier, if you have questions, we'll make sure you got all of our contact information. You can, if you want to sit down and talk about your specific market and how you might implement SNAP or something like that, we're happy to meet with you one-on-one and do that. So don't hesitate to reach out. So we're going to tonight cover 2 topics. So Erin's going to kick us off with looking at some legal structures for farmers markets and the importance of why you might want to have a formal legal structure. And then that'll kind of lead into Margaret talking about implementing SNAP EBT program at your farmers market. And we'll have Jen from the Sunday market at College View and Lincoln jumping on here about halfway through. So I'm going to pass it over to Erin to get us started.
Well, as Ben said, I'm Erin Schoenberg. I work at the Center for Rural Affairs, and we do a lot of work with beginning farmers, small business owners, immigrant communities, tribal communities, policy, all sorts of stuff. And I'm really excited to be doing this specific work. I'm from a really small town, and I've also been in various small businesses that have had different types of legal structure set up. So hopefully I'm coming with some good background. The topic that I'll be kicking off tonight is legal structure, and it's not simple, and I'm not going to have all the answers. And while this information might be just perfect for some of you, for others, you might be at a different level. Maybe you are even more of an expert on certain types of entities or starting from a different point than others. And so just hoping to give everyone, though, like a good starting point, and then know that we are here to get started with legal structure. It can be confusing. It's not a simple topic. And I also will just preface this with the information tonight. We're trying to impact both the market managers, as well as individual vendors. So I'll try to, make that relevant. But again, as Ben said, we want to keep it casual. And if you have questions or even, information to share that we could all benefit from, don't be shy to step up. I'll also leave some room at the end to put some more resources up on the screen of some particular agencies and organizations across the country that are just loaded with info. So as I look at it, the 3 reasons why having a business structure is so important, it can all pretty much fit under liability, credibility, and eligibility. So when you think about the eligibility part of things, if you are set up with an official legal structure, that's going to allow you to take that first step toward accessing programs and services like the SNAP benefits, for example. If you don't have any type of entity, of structure set up, you're going to be left out of programs like that, of even applying to be a part of them. Same goes for things like loans and grants. So this is just a first step to get you on that track of being eligible for a lot of different programs. As far as credibility goes, not only to be, seen as a professional in the workplace when you're in, a loan office, or, just being seen as part of the community, being able to say that you have that structure just puts you on like a different plane, especially I think in a lot of small towns when there aren't necessarily as many motivators to take those steps. This can really kind of set you apart, set you up on a higher field there. And then liability is absolutely huge. The liability on a personal level that you have without a legal structure, and even if you take certain options within that, you do put yourself personally and your property at risk there. So I think we all want to, minimize that type of liability where we can. So this is going to be a way to do that. And also, if you don't go through any type of process to get set up on your own, the state of Nebraska can assign you to a default business structure. And that might not be one that you would have chosen had you taken the time and looked into creating your own. For example, a sole proprietorship and a general partnership are two default business structures. But if you actually look into it and read more, you might have wanted to get set up as an LLC or a nonprofit. But if you didn't take those steps on your own, you'll end up, again, just with a structure that isn't ideal for what you want to do. So here are, again, just some of those reasons plus a couple more spelled out. I think when we're talking about farmers markets, in particularly the volunteer step here is pretty important. A lot of farmers markets really depend on volunteers. I know Jen, who will be joining us for the second part of tonight, will talk about how important volunteers are at the Sunday market in Lincoln. So that's one thing, one reason why you might make certain choices over others. That last line, the can ease business succession, that really comes into play for individual businesses. So if you're a vendor at a farmer's market, that's where you're going to be thinking about that business succession more than, for a nonprofit or for like a corporation that will remain kind of without you handing it off to someone. It's set up differently. So if you are, a farmer or other small business owner who wants to pass that on, getting set up with the formal structure is going to make that actually doable. So, yep, a few other reasons here. I think we've pretty much covered most of these, so I'll keep moving. This is part of a chart that includes multiple types of business structure. And I'm not going to, read through every one of these because we're, pretty limited on time tonight, but these will be in, the slides that we're able to send out to you too. But it's important that you take some time, either if you are starting a new business or if you are already, you kind of got the market manager baton handed to you and you hadn't had a chance to ask yourself some of these questions, and maybe the person who came before you didn't. Over the winter, that's a great time to take a step back and think about, asking yourself these questions, thinking about if you want to have partners. Do you want to be, the only owner? How easy of a process do you want to pop into to get set up? Do you want to get away with not having annual meetings? Well, these two types of structures are going to be something you might consider. With the sole proprietorship and the general partnership, those are the two simplest, easiest, fastest structures for you to take on. I would say, not to give, specific advice to a manager or a vendor exactly, but generally a sole prop or a partnership are not going to be ideal for the market itself. This is a better fit for an individual business owner or a couple people working together. You are going to have some personal liability to consider with a sole prop and a partnership, but it's also something that can always be upgraded upon. So this could be a good place to start. And then as you think about some of the pros and cons, you can kind of step it up to take the next level of structure that might be a little more complicated, but comes with the benefits of decreasing that personal liability. So an LLC would be that next step up, you could say, from a sole prop or a partnership. You can have multiple owners. You will spend some money and some time going through a process of getting set up. But after that, you are personally removed from the liability if things were to happen. And we'll go through a couple examples of what types of things could happen that you would want to be, protected from. So you see there are more requirements with an LLC, but again, a lot of individual businesses, like a farm or a bakery who might sell at the farmer's market, as well as the market themselves, LLC is a pretty common choice. Nonprofit is another really common choice for the market. Generally, a farmer or a baker or another type of vendor would not choose the nonprofit status, and we'll go through these on a later slide, but in part because nonprofits are generally not really allowed to compete in the marketplace in the same way as like a privately owned business would. You are allowed to have volunteers more readily with a nonprofit, and you can make a profit, but it's how you use that profit that's going to be determined by the structure. We are not going to spend too much time on corporations. There are a lot of markets that choose to be set up often as like an S corporation, which is for smaller businesses, and by smaller I mean like 100 or fewer than 100 owners. And so this is going to be at that level where shareholders can be involved, where you're dealing with generally slightly larger businesses. However, there are resource providers out there who may be pretty comfortable and familiar with working with corporations. So it doesn't mean you should just write it off, but it hasn't been seen to be a popular fit with markets in this state. We do know that in Iowa, there are a lot of markets that go for a corporation status. There's one more type of corporation we'll talk about briefly. That's a B Corp, which is a benefit corporation. So again, won't spend time on this, but this is just all of those columns put together that you can possibly help determine what type of structure you want by asking yourself, those questions and really taking some time to go through that. But even if you thought that's too many choices to pick from, there are a couple other structures that are worth considering. This is not necessarily just for the market, but vendors could also choose to be set up in the following ways, which would be a cooperative, to find an umbrella organization that will take them under, which could be a chamber, it could be a like a downtown association, it could be a grocery store, for example, that kind of took a market under its own business structure. And then that B Corporation is a for-profit business, but it's mission driven. And so one example that I found that a lot of people might know of would be the company Patagonia, right? It's an outdoor company that's known to have certain like social and environmental priorities. And so they have put themselves into a different bracket called a B Corporation that holds them to a higher standard. So you can see as a market that might be appealing as well, because of course it is a mission-driven type of organization that you want to benefit the community, you want to benefit many vendors, not just you. And so that's something else to consider. I'm not even gonna do this. This is just too much information, but I want you to have it later when we share these to look at this chart. One of the differences in this compared to the other one is that it does include cooperative and limited cooperative association at the far right. So we'll keep moving on, because I'd love to talk to you about all the examples in my personal life that might help you wrap your brain around it a little more if you haven't already gone through any steps in creating a business structure. So several years ago, my husband and I formed a trucking business to ship local food from farmers to buyers. And because we were married and already filing taxes jointly, and we wanted to keep it simple and see how the business grew over a few years, we decided to stick with that sole proprietorship level of structure. It was very easy to form. We registered our trade name, and it was very simple to dissolve, and we decided that we were going to kind of advance our business in different ways. We had every intention of scaling up to LLC, but we thought that sole prop would be the easiest way to just get started. So it was a decision that we made, even though there were two of us, and often with two people, a partnership would be another kind of easy structure to start with. Because of the filing taxes jointly and the fact that the taxes of the business pass through to the individuals, we started with that. So if that gives you a little bit of an idea there. A general partnership, on the other hand, can be great for two people. It can also be more than two people, but kind of by that default name, even partnership, it kind of implies that most commonly it's two owners involved. You can have partnerships that split the percentage of ownership differently than 50-50. When Margaret, the same Margaret that's in this call, and I started this business together, we wanted to be 50-50. We created and signed a partnership agreement, which is a contract, and that helps you have a little bit more safety in your structure. Without that, you can't really know, what might happen with the relationship you have with your business partner. Nothing bad happened in our, situation. Everything worked great. But if something was to happen, if things change, having an agreement is a little bit of a safety net for you, that things are more clear. The partnership itself does not do its own taxes. The tax obligations pass through to the individual owners on that. So we each filed our own, versus in the business I had with my husband, we filed that together. There's one form that the partnership fills out, which is that Schedule K. And just like in the other example, we planned to upgrade to a little bit more of a complex structure if we had continued for a long time, but this was easy to start and it was easy to stop when we decided to move on. So about those liability issues that you really do need to keep in mind, especially at a farmer's market, would be really common things that happen, sometimes every week at the market. A shopper could trip on a cord and fall. You could take a loan out, let's say, to buy, extra canopies and wagons to help shoppers with, and you end up, not having enough money to pay those back. The market tents could, snap in the wind, hit someone's car. And then there's this terrible and graphic example that I went through last time, and I almost don't even want to share, but it involves a farmer assisting a driver on the highway, and that vehicle slipping off the jack and getting sued, even though it was, almost fit into a type of Good Samaritan scenario. You are very personally liable if you are not set up with a structure that protects you more. And to have that personal liability removed, it's going to need to be that LLC, that corporation, a nonprofit, or at the very least, like I have down at the bottom there, when you have liability insurance, that is going to lower your risk. So definitely something to look into with the liability if you're not, set up with a different type of structure. A lot of times markets actually require that, of vendors. And so that does help. It eliminates risk for the market, and it eliminates risk for each one of the vendors to have some liability. So last example here, and this is for the LLC. This is the local food distributor. So we had 6 owners, and almost everyone had the same percent of ownership, but a couple of us didn't. And so that is something that's just harder to manage if you aren't set up more formally, like with the limited liability company, which hasn't, I guess, been probably spelled out until now. And then, you know, we had just so much to think about. So many factors were involved. We had dozens of customers, dozens of vendors that we worked with. You know, we sold wholesale from individual farmers. We were renting property. We had multiple trucks that we owned. There's a lot of food safety concerns, of course, when you're dealing with what we were. So there was a lot of liability to consider. And we wanted to remove, of course, our own personal assets from that risk. And so getting set up with an LLC structure allowed us to do that, kind of have that peace of mind to, you know, get our work done. And it also helps, I think, just like that partnership agreement helps just kind of take a little bit of the personal edge off in case, like, you hope nothing will ever happen, you know, relationship wise, but if it does at all, or if things change for people and you want to change the business, grow it, members want to leave, it just gives you a clear process on how to do that. And just like when managers have, you know, clear rules for conflict management, that really helps things. Same with just having those, like, that business paperwork in place. Also, the more owners you work with, you have the potential to start your market or start your farm or other business with more capital, which is a total win-win, you know, if you have it. Big F. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on corporations, but they do have some advantages because they really probably have the greatest protection for owners. You can have many, many owners. You know, you can have, you know, up to 100 as an S Corp, which is for, you know, a smaller business. And then like a standard C corporation is even bigger than that. That B Corp comes in for those who have, you know, have that mission-driven mindset. And if people are interested in this and want to, like, really hear about it from the farmers market side of things, let us know, because our friends in Iowa, the Northeast Iowa RC&D, they have a really, really in-depth toolkit. And they go into a little bit of detail anyway about how quite a few markets in Iowa have chosen this structure. So I don't want to leave that out if people want to learn more later. So nonprofit, again, this is going to be a choice popular with the market side of things, not so much the individual vendors. Here is one example of a market that's set up as a nonprofit, the Sunday Farmers Market. This is not a rural market. This is a Lincoln-based one. This is who will be joining us, you know, in a little bit. Just a few basic things about nonprofits. There's not, you know, a single owner. You can make a profit. It just depends on how you use those. And you can certainly still pay compensation for those who work for the nonprofit. And they're not generally supposed to compete with other vendors in the marketplace, but it doesn't mean that a nonprofit vendor can't exist, because they certainly do. I don't know if we have any on the call tonight. I think, I'm trying to think of last night too. I know we have had some participate so far. It might be, so an example that's personal to me is that I worked for a nonprofit in Lincoln, Community Crops, back in the day, and we were able to have a booth at the farmers market. competing along with other farmers, but we were there with farmers who were in a training program. And so it allowed us to fit in there. We really were very careful that we weren't competing unfairly, with other farmers, that we weren't using any type of advantage, but we were doing it with that goal of helping the beginning farmers we worked with learn those skills. And so there are certainly nonprofit vendors too. Cooperatives is another interesting model, and I included some info about NCDC, which I highly recommend checking out. They have an incredibly detailed website with so many resources for people who are interested in this type of approach. It can really be structured in different ways. The main points about it is that it's a community-based approach. Often member owners, when you get involved, you each have one vote, and so it can be seen as a more democratic approach to decision making and involvement than other types of structure where you can continue to purchase more shares and more ownership. This can be set up in a way that it's one person, one vote. It's definitely more of that mission-driven type of structure, like a nonprofit would share and like the B Corporation would share. Of course, private businesses that are set up as a sole prop can also be mission-driven if you so choose, but it's not necessarily part of the backbone of the structure. So that's a little bit about cooperatives, and wanted to include this because if this is interesting to you at all and you end up spending some time on their website learning more, they have grants available. I don't know if it's every year, but I think it's either every year or really most of the time. Sometimes they're just mini grants, a couple $1,000s, but it can help you get set up not only with just how to structure it, but even paying for staff sometimes or different operational expenses. And then, totally didn't mean to set up this slide like this. This is great. Umbrella organizations is another really common type of way to get, it's not a structure itself. Sorry, I'm not getting that spelled out correctly. It's not a structure, but what it does is it allows a market to kind of get under someone else's wing who's already set up. So it can really help house the market and not make you go through the extra work of getting set up as an entirely separate entity. So there are plenty of markets in Nebraska that do this. Sometimes you see it as this trade-off in that the market and the manager don't have as much control, don't make as many decisions, but really it can be set up, very specific case by case. I think in many cases, the umbrella organization would want to be hands-off. They trust you, if you've been a manager, especially for a while, and the market is not brand new, they probably trust you to do your job. They might have, a few, requirements or changes that you would work through, but definitely something to think about. I know we've had some folks on the calls who have done this. So if you are already involved in a structure like this, an umbrella org, we'd love to hear about it.
It could just go any number of ways. So we've talked to some markets where the umbrella organization actually has paid staff who will manage the market and kind of play that role. Other ones are really much more hands-off, kind of, we're here as an entity to provide liability insurance and do a little bit of promotion and marketing, and the rest is kind of up to you as vendors to make sure the day-to-day operations run smoothly. So I think it really runs the gamut. So, thinking about your board, that would be a good opportunity for your board to sort of come together and say, what is it that we really need from a umbrella organization, or what would benefit our market, and then start thinking about who those partners potentially are within the community. communities that, the chamber is, as Aubrey was saying, is often responsible for the downtown area, the business kind of opportunities that are available downtown. Farmers markets are kind of a great entrepreneurial launching pad, so to speak, for small farm businesses. And I think it seems to be, and we were talking to Beatrice last week, and their kind of economic development chamber oversees the market there. And it seems like, it just kind of fits in with that spirit of a chamber of commerce supporting small business and attracting residents and tourists to come and enjoy events in town. So
yeah, one thing to note is that no matter what you decide, no matter what kind of structure you want to pursue, you pretty much have an IRS obligation no matter what. There's really not much of a way out of this, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be that much work. It seems like a lot, but there are so many resources out there that can help you keep track of what you need to. A lot of markets, just like a lot of farms, at least in early years, might not be able to show income at the end of the year or any net profit, but just even that piece of information is still important to report. Not that you made money that will be taxed, but that you didn't make money. And this actually goes back into eligibility even of certain programs and services. If you can show that you're out there, that really can open up funding in certain cases. In a way, I think about it like the census. If no one knows you're out there, how are you going to be, considered for certain assistance or certain services? So do keep that in mind. And I included the just the name of this really awesome resource. The Center for Ag and Food Systems is a really good one for some of the legal stuff. Let's see here. Oops. So if you are not with a structure yet and you think there are at least a few steps you want to take on this winter, here would be a good order of operations to get started with that. You can call the Secretary of State's office, and I did a trial run of this last week to make sure this really was a great first step, that we were doing this right. Someone picks up, a real person picks up right away, and they will really help walk you through this. They have a very easy to navigate website. You can ask them any question and they will point you in the right direction. And so definitely recommend that. Just being upfront, saying who you are, what you're trying to do, they will help you. What's great about that resource is that it's local to the state. And so some of the resources that I'll share on the next slide of some really great websites to check out, great organizations, while I certainly do recommend them as resources, they're often a national resource. And so, when you call these local numbers, that'll really help get you the final info. The tax ID number is also important, and you're going to need that. I think Margaret might go into that a little bit on the SNAP end of things in the second half. That's one of the things you might need to get set up. You'll register your business with the Department of Revenue. This is particularly important for anyone selling things like merchandise or any sales taxable items. And then the needed insurance is one more step. And there are a lot of, or at least a handful, there's an amount of companies out there, insurance companies, that work with local farmers and local farmers markets and have kind of gotten to know the ropes of what extra assistance they can offer and what might need done. So that can be just extra helpful to get put in touch with someone who has that experience. So here are some of those great resources. Farm Commons is pretty specific to individual farmers. The Farmers Market Legal Toolkit covers kind of a lot of liability and legal questions for whether you're an individual vendor or a market yourself. And yes, SARE has great info. The SBA is a great go-to. That's federal though. So again, you can probably find some local resources on there. They do have some like more local chapters. And then REAP is the Rural Enterprise Assistance Project, and that's part of the Center for Rural Affairs. And we offer a lot of small business trainings for any type of business. So even if you can think of other business owners who might own a business by default, but you don't think have gone through any formal steps, you know, send them to REAP, send them to some of these other resources, and that'll be a good way to just kind of kick that process off. This isn't something I'll read through, but just with the SNAP piece coming next, this will give you an idea of which person, which, you know, will be responsible for those SNAP eligibility and tasks that need to be gone through. So just something to think about here. And that's gonna wrap this up. I think that is the last slide. I'd love to hear different experiences from the group because we never know who will be here, you know, and what like level of experience you have.
I had a question. So with the legal structure, is there some of those, whether it's the partnership or corporation, that can or can't apply for like USDA grants or different things like that?
That's an awesome question. So depending on, the USDA has a multitude of grant programs out there, and each one will specify who can apply. And so there are some where you pretty much have to be a nonprofit in order to apply. But there are others, I can think of a specific one that's called the Value Added Producer Grant that is not for nonprofits. Nonprofits aren't eligible. You have to be like an individual or a private business that's set up, you know, with that other type of structure like the LLC, corporation, sole prop, partnership. There are others that maybe sometimes allow for kind of both parties to join, but it's just different. It's different per each. And Martha, if there are like specific USDA grants you've got questions about, between those of us on the call, we might have experience either having applied or received one or know of others. So let us know if there's something more specific there.
Okay, and then to gather information about grants that come up, is there a specific website to get on to be able to get notifications for that?
Going to grants.gov.
Yeah.
That's my kind of go-to.
And I believe on there you can sign up to get notifications about certain things. Yeah, grants.gov is a really good one for the USDA.
Grants are very new to me, and I was just talking with someone about this today, and her suggestion was read through grants that have been submitted in prior years and accepted. And I did that. Like I was looking through past farmers market promotion program grants, which are is the one that is behind this training. And that was so helpful. That was so helpful to see like what other people were doing, how they were arranging it, like, and also who they were partnering with. Because a lot of these grants, it's not just you partnering or applying sometimes, like you're partnering with another organization, maybe with Extension, maybe with Buy Fresh, Buy Local, something like that. So those are just a couple ideas.
Pass it over to Margaret to introduce the SNAP EBT section.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody. So we'll get moving here because SNAP is, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about everything, and I'm not going to cover everything, but again, hopefully you'll walk away with a little bit more of an understanding about what the program is and how you can accept SNAP benefits at a farmer's market. And just a little rundown of like the second half of the training. I'm going to give a quick presentation, you know, hopefully staying under 20 minutes. And then we are joined by Jen Burianek, who is the market manager from the Sunday market at College View, which is Lincoln's Sunday morning market. And it's a market that accepts SNAP on the market side of things. And we're going to be talking with Jen about kind of the specifics about how they implement the program. So I'll give you a brief rundown, then we'll get Jen in here, and then we'll have time for some conversation and questions after that. So I'm Margaret Milligan, and I work at Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska, who we're working with Extension and Center for Rural Affairs on this grant. And I will just give a quick shout out to Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska and the Cooperative Development Center. We're part of the Cooperative Development Center. So I would say if you are interested in the cooperative business structure, be in touch. And that is what we help people do. We help people in rural areas of Nebraska start cooperatives. So I just had to give that little plug. And I wanted to start off with the basics of what SNAP is. And first of all, it stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. And it provides benefits or funds to supplement the food budget of families so they can purchase healthy food and move towards self-sufficiency. So it serves over 38 million people across the United States, and that's 19 million households. To be eligible for SNAP benefits, a person or a household has to meet certain eligibility requirements, and that's mostly focused on monthly income. So, you know, people who have lost employment, people who are in jobs that are, you know, there's low wages involved, people who have suffered through a recession or an economic disaster or a pandemic or a natural disaster. These are all people who have benefited from the SNAP program. So there's a wide variety of people who are using it. And who's in charge of the program? It is a USDA program. It is a part of the Farm Bill, and it is kind of administered through the Food and Nutrition Service, the FNS. And on top of that, every state has an agency or a department that kind of like enacts the program on a state basis. So in Nebraska, the Department of Health and Human Services does that. So that's where people apply to receive their SNAP benefits. That's through the Department of Health and Human Services. And that's also who gives out the EBT card, which is the way you access your benefits. And right now in Nebraska, there's about 160,000 people that are using SNAP benefits. And it kind of varies and fluctuates throughout the year and like throughout counties because it is based on income. It can fluctuate like that. So there's 160,000 people on SNAP in Nebraska right now. There's about 1,300 retailers, so that's grocery stores, farmers markets that are authorized to use these SNAP benefits. And the participation of SNAP really, it varies county to county in Nebraska. I just have a couple of like snapshots, like 9% of households in Gage County, which is where Beatrice is. And that's about 840 households were on SNAP in, I think, 2019 or 2017. So that's 9% of households in that county, 12% of households in Scottsbluff County out west. You know, it varies greatly from county to county. But there are quite a few people participating in the program in Nebraska. So a little bit about SNAP eligible foods. Most foods that you can buy from a grocery store are eligible to be purchased through the SNAP program. So that's fruits and veggies and canned items, boxed meals, frozen food, milk and dairy, juice, coffee beans, etc. There are non-eligible food items that you can't use your SNAP benefits to purchase, and I mean that includes alcohol and tobacco. But the big things for farmers markets is you can't use SNAP benefits generally to purchase hot, ready to eat items. So there's some nuances to that I'm not really going to get into, but maybe, you know, if you have questions for Jen, please, or if you have questions, type them into the chat box. But the big distinction is, like, you typically can't use your SNAP benefits to purchase like a meal that you're going to consume, a hot meal that you're going to consume on site. And to access SNAP funds, people use an EBT card, and we see the Nebraska EBT card right here. And that is, again, distributed through the Department of Health and Human Services. And EBT stands for Electronic Benefit Transfer. So people are getting their benefits onto this card. They're using the card, they're swiping the card, entering their PIN number in, and receiving those funds. And they swipe at grocery stores and whatnot. So it's really similar to a debit or credit card in that way. And you use your EBT card at an authorized SNAP retailer or firm. And those authorized SNAP retailers or firms can be grocery stores, they can be convenience stores, they can be big like box stores, they can be a Walmart, a Super Target, they can be a Casey's. I was looking at a list of retailers, and most of I would say the vast majority of retailers in the state of Nebraska are convenience stores. So that's really interesting to me, and something to be kept in mind, that people are needing to access food and use these benefits where they live. And oftentimes the convenience store is what's available. There might not be a small grocery store. So you can use them at a variety of different places. Also, for our purposes, you can use the SNAP benefits at a farmer's market or at an individual farm stand or vendor booth. Those can be authorized to accept SNAP benefits. And there's a lot of places that accept SNAP in the country and also in Nebraska, and I won't go into those numbers. Let me see if I can advance the slide. So what we're going to talk about tonight is SNAP at a farmer's market, and let's dive in here. There's two possibilities with SNAP at a farmer's market. One possibility is that the farmer's market itself, whatever entity you are or you've chosen to be, like, they will become the authorized SNAP retailer, and then all vendors selling eligible food at that market are then able to accept SNAP funds. So that's the first option. The second option would be like an individual vendor at the farmer's market would become an authorized SNAP retailer. So that would be like Daniel's Produce up in Columbus, right? They are an authorized SNAP retailer. So they accept SNAP benefits at their farm stands and market booths. So those are the two possibilities at a farmer's market with SNAP. And I'm just gonna go over this real quick, like what it looks like, those two possibilities in a market operated SNAP. I'm not gonna talk about this too much because Jen will be describing her system to us, but it is basically the market is authorized, people run their SNAP card at a market booth and receive tokens to buy things from the farmers market vendors, and then vendors are reimbursed for those tokens. With the vendor operated SNAP, the individual farm or farmers market vendor is authorized, and they are running the SNAP, the EBT card through their POS system, and the folks are using their EBT card to purchase eligible items, and then the farm / vendor are reimbursed through FNS, through basically the USDA for any charges on the SNAP.
Hey, Margaret, I just jump in.
Yeah.
We had a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
I think one of them you're going to get to here in a minute about POS systems and whether or not they can accept other forms of payment. But Kristen also asked where you found that information about percentage of people in the specific area that are on the SNAP program.
I found it on a statistical survey website. It is not always, you can find it on the USDA FNS website. You can find those numbers. They only break it down through congressional districts, right? So like there's only those very broad districts. So there is some question, why would you want to accept SNAP or EBT as a market, as a market entity or as an individual vendor? And there are a few really good reasons to consider that option. Number one, you're appealing to more people. You're making local food accessible to more people. Whether it's true or not, or whether we like it or not, farmers markets are sometimes thought of as places where it's too expensive to shop, like compared to a bigger box store. That is an idea that's out there. And by accepting multiple forms of payment like SNAP or other food assistance programs, your farmers market and your vendors will become more accessible to more people in your area. You can also kind of make a name for yourself. There's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of farmers markets accepting SNAP in the state of Nebraska, and there's not a lot of farms accepting SNAP in the state of Nebraska. So there is an opportunity to become regionally known, or like known within a certain radius as a place that accepts SNAP benefits. And like I was saying earlier, there's not always a lot of places that accept SNAP, and you could tap into that basically. You could be competing with a Casey's, honestly, and Casey's isn't going to be selling fresh fruits and vegetables by and large, and a lot of people are looking for that. So that's another reason. There's also the community impact that you'll be having. Like for every dollar spent at a local independent business, it will generate 3 times more in local economic activity than if you spend it at a national chain. And so that activity is just going to snowball into other positive outcomes for your community. And another reason, there's like a lot of great incentive programs. For instance, there's the Double Up Food Bucks program, which basically doubles people's SNAP dollars. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but basically doubles them up to $20 to be used on fresh fruits and vegetables. And they do a lot of promotion of the program and marketing. So there's a lot of reasons to consider it. And also $24.4 million were spent in SNAP benefits at farmers markets in 2017. But there are also some things to consider before applying. It's not right for every market. It's not right for every vendor. And before you jump in and like just go crazy with the SNAP program, there are a lot of things to consider, and taking the time to inform yourself and really think about if this is the right decision will save you a lot of time and energy and potentially money. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but really the cost is one of the biggest things that you'll need to be considering. There's a lot of costs associated with a SNAP program, including equipment costs, service fees, purchasing tokens, staff time to run the program, marketing the program, and just general record keeping. There's a lot of time involved in some equipment. So time, labor, and tangible like equipment-y things. And you also should consider that because this is a pretty highly regulated federal program, there's a responsibility that comes with it. And the person who applies to be a SNAP authorized retailer is the person who's responsible for making sure that, you know, you're not selling non-eligible food items, that all your record keeping is in order. So there's some considerations that need to happen before you pull the trigger on that program. And I would encourage anyone, I know that winter is coming, so, you know, maybe use the winter to come up with a sample budget for a SNAP program, or even a sample budget for your farmer's market. Like, I don't know how many of you are budgeting, and you could like absolutely not need to budget, but if you, it's helpful for me, or like at least in my mind, to like know what the estimated cost of a program would be, to understand if I could actually do this, if it's right for my market, if it's right for my farm. So I'd encourage you to work it out on paper first and see if it works out. And also I would consider partnering with a like-minded organization. Like, since these programs typically cost money to implement, and farmers markets are not always the most profit-driven businesses, like it makes a lot of sense to partner with an organization like a hospital or a community action center, volunteer agencies, local governments, chambers, even community colleges. Those organizations all support farmers markets because they bring vitality and health to our communities. So you just might want to consider reaching out to them. And the application process is pretty similar if you're a farmer's market or an individual vendor. I'm not going to go into like the specifics of the application process, but long story short, you just apply through the USDA to become an authorized retailer. I've actually done it before. Back when Erin and I were farming together, we became authorized retailers as a farm to accept SNAP benefits to be used to purchase a CSA subscription from our farm. And reviewing the application process for this presentation reminded me that it is fairly straightforward, and there are people to help you through the process, like the staff at Food and Nutrition Services, FNS. They want you to become an authorized retailer, and they will walk step by step through the application with you. And it's really not that bad. Like, you get somebody on the phone and they will help you. So that's what I just did want to mention, though, that there are some things that you will need to complete an application, and you'll need to like have some kind of structure to your farmer's market or business. You'll need photo ID and social security number. You'll need some business licenses if they're applicable, which the people at FNS will walk you through if they're applicable or not. You'll also need to be prepared to give out bank information so they can set up direct deposit. And there's a couple other like signature items that you'll need. So those are kind of the things that you'll need to have a handle on before you decide to apply. After you've applied, or even before, I would suggest just kind of walking through each one of these and considering them, because it's never as simple as just like, I'm gonna accept SNAP EBT at my farmer's market. There's all these other things that need to happen before, during, and after you make that decision. So you'll need to think about getting EBT equipment. So that's the point of sale, swipe, PIN number type of deals. And if you're a farmer's market, you'll need to think about getting a currency system in place. You'll need to think about where you're gonna fund the SNAP program and how you're gonna train yourself or vendors. And you're gonna need to think about how to market the program and tell people that you are awesome and you accept SNAP. So the first thing I'd like to go over is the EBT equipment. And these are the swipey, PIN number-y things. And you typically go through some kind of service provider company to get the ability to accept EBT and SNAP. And those are often the same people that you go through to get the ability to accept debit and credit card transactions. So a lot of these service providers, they'll either rent, sell, or give you equipment like card readers, and that'll give you the ability to swipe people's card. And to Candy's point earlier, you can obtain like point of sale devices and equipment and services that only run SNAP EBT, and you can get point of sale devices and equipment that only run credit card and debit, and you can get ones that do all three. There are a lot of options out there for however you want to configure your market. I feel like a lot of examples of markets that I've seen have done all three at once, the EBT, credit and debit devices. And one of the reasons that they might do that is because, as I was saying earlier, the more forms of payment you accept, the more likely more people are going to purchase things. Because I've been at a farmer's market and I haven't had cash. I haven't been able to purchase that like plate full of kolaches that I really wanted. And I've had to walk away. So that's just something to consider, that like credit and debit might be a good option to consider alongside of SNAP EBT. And there are so many options out there for equipment. I would just really suggest going, talking to other farmers markets or small businesses to find out who they use. Do they like them? We also have some resources for some like comparisons of different equipment and service providers. If you're starting out, there is also a program that is grant funded. It's called Market Link, and they provide EBT POS equipment free and services free for up to a year. I think like the first year's free. So you'll also need to consider market currency, and I'm just gonna kind of whip through this one because I think Jen can talk a little bit more about it, but the basic idea is people swipe their cards and they get tokens that represent however much they've swiped the card for. So let's say $20, swipe the card for $20, get $20 in tokens. You use those tokens at vendors, and then at the end of the day, the vendors take their tokens to the market booth and they are reimbursed somehow for however many tokens they have. SNAP training, I wanted to mention this. This is just another thing that you're gonna need to address somehow. SNAP training is all about making sure that people know what the program is, know what the eligible food is, and are implementing the program in the correct ways, because if you don't, there are penalties, and the person who applies to be an authorized retailer, so the farmer's market or the farm, they're responsible for those penalties, which can be monetary or they can be, they can affect your future eligibility. Funding a SNAP program is really quite the issue, and we're all trying to figure it out, but people do it a variety of ways, through vendor fees, through merchandise sales, through partnerships in the community. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And we can ask Jen how they fund their program as well. And you've also got to market the program, and that is where partnerships are really important, because a lot of, who has the time to market a program on top of everything else that you're doing? So with that, I would love to talk a little bit with Jen about the Sunday Farmers Market. Jen, are you there?
Yes, I am, and I'm unmuted now. So there we go.
Hey, welcome, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. If you could just introduce yourself and the Sunday Farmers Market for us, that'd be awesome. If you want to touch on like what legal structure you guys are, how many vendors, how many staff and volunteers, that'd be great.
My name's Jen Burianek. I am the market manager for the Sunday Farmers Market in College View. We're located right off of the corner of 48th and Prescott in Lincoln. Our hours are from 10 to 2. We run the last week in April through the last week in October. And then we also have a holiday market that we kind of tack on to the end of that. We are a nonprofit. We didn't start that way. We started in 2005 and then became a 501c3 in 2008. And that was long before my time, so I don't have a lot of insight to share on that one. But the market was originally the old Cheney Road Farmers Market. And then we moved to our current site in 2018. And so that's when the name changed. We have about 40 vendors weekly, and normally outside of COVID, we're closer to the 50s, just above 50. It's just as far as scale goes, we have 2 staff members, so myself and an assistant market manager. We're both contract employees, so part-time contract employees. On a typical market day, we have about, before COVID, 2,400, and then with COVID, about 1,700 adult paying customers, right? So we don't count kiddos with that. Let's see, what else did you say to cover?
Do you have a volunteer program?
Oh yes. So Margaret is one of our fabulous volunteers. We have about 6 rotating volunteers, and they help us not only with setup and things like that, but also run the market booth. So help us with the process of running cards for EBT and whatnot. So
awesome. Thank you, Jen. Do you want to take a moment to describe how SNAP works at the Sunday farmers market?
Sure. So I'll just focus on like the day of, and then we can talk a little bit about the other stuff too. So customers come to our market information booth with their SNAP or their EBT card, and then they run their card for tokens. And so we just run it just like a typical credit or debit card. So we have a wireless terminal. We use North American Bank Card for our service because we run credit cards as well. Typically, not with COVID, but that's a whole other story. So so then they get tokens for the amount that they run their card for, and then they just shop the market just like normal, purchasing things with their tokens that are items that are eligible for their tokens for SNAP with their tokens. And then when vendors have collected enough tokens, we usually ask them to try and accrue about $30 of tokens before they turn in their tokens to us. And that's because we cut checks for their tokens. And so then we're doing that for $5 every week. It gets a little bit laborious. So when they turn in their tokens, we have this token redemption sheet that they turn in. And so it just lists the date and the vendor name, and then how many tokens. And then typically we'll tear off the bottom, we'll count right there at market, and then we'll tear off the bottom as a receipt and hand that to them. With COVID, we've changed that a little bit because we're not handling their tokens the same day. So whereas normally I would count them, I would give them their receipt, and then the following day on Monday, I log into our bank account after I count them again when I get home. And I issue them a check through our bill pay. So let me step back a minute. So when they fill out the token redemption form and hand us their tokens in a Ziploc bag, then we count those to verify that the amount is correct, and then give them their receipt. And then I also document that at home on Excel, right? So I'm documenting how many tokens we've received along with that process of issuing those, issuing the checks to the vendors. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I have a question. I wonder if you could just touch on, you guys also have other tokens at the farmers market.
Right.
And I don't know if you could describe that a little bit.
Right. So in non-COVID times, we run credit and debit cards at our booth as well. So those are over in the corner, but so those are $5 tokens versus the SNAP being $1 tokens. And part of that is we cannot give change for the SNAP tokens, right? You can't give cash back. And so that's why they're $1 tokens, just to try and limit that issue with people not being able to buy what they want, right? And so in general, we run those programs just directly side by side. So if somebody wants to use their credit or debit card, they come to the market information booth and they get processed the exact same way, except for they're given the $5 tokens instead of the $1 SNAP tokens. And then the vendors, when they turn in their tokens for redemption on their little sheet, there's a spot for the $5 tokens and a spot for the SNAP tokens. And so then they're just accumulated in that process. So they're run together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it, like I've heard, you know, like running running SNAP and EBT as well as credit and debit and having that token system, it is a nice way to lessen the stigma of that maybe some people feel if they are participating in SNAP and they'd be the only ones using the tokens. So you talked about how the vendors are reimbursed through checks, right? And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, like, is that, so that's not the same day, it's taking place, reimbursement is taking place how long afterwards?
Right. So normally they would turn in their tokens at market, right? Not necessarily every market, just depending on how many tokens they accrue. And then I target without COVID, I would target that next Monday. So we have market on Sunday, and then on Monday I would recount the tokens again to make sure nothing got lost in the shuffle, and then issue the checks there. Through our bill pay with our bank, it's usually within a week. I think it's 5 to 7 days after I push the button to send those checks, that then it arrives in their mailbox. Now with COVID, I'm not touching anything brought back, any money or any tokens, right, for a week. So it just is in a holding zone for a week. And so the vendors are having to wait a little, like an extra week for that processing. And so that's something that we include that information in our training for our vendors.
How do you train your vendors to know?
Right. So we have a 2-part training. So the first part is just an informational, we call it a token agreement, because there's a signature form on the back that walks through both of our token programs. So both the $5 token program and the SNAP program. And then there's a signature on the back that also includes the information of where the checks are to be sent when they put in a token redemption. And on top of that, then we've created a type of a quiz using SurveyMonkey. So it's kind of a workaround program, right? So so they're taking the survey, answering questions about SNAP, and then we're able to check in and see if there's any confusion about the application of the program, and then follow back up with the vendors that maybe answered the survey question incorrectly, right? So we can make sure everybody's on the same page about what each token can be used to purchase.
Real quick, Jen, and then we'll get into some of the questions that are coming in the chat box and let other folks ask their questions. But since funding is such an integral part of this, how does the Sunday market fund its program?
Right. So our SNAP component is just purely funded through stall fees. And this is something our market hasn't used a lot of sponsorship or other programs yet. It's something that we've talked about doing at the beginning of this year, and then with COVID and everything, it kind of got side railed. So that's something that is definitely a way that we could potentially lower our stall fees, right, and help make the market more accessible to more farmers. So that's something, there's always an eye on opportunities to lessen those expenses.
That's great. Thank you. Maybe should we move into open it up to anybody else out there? I know that it looks like we answered Candy's question about different tokens for SNAP versus credit cards. How much are the fees for SNAP? Like, how much does the market pay in fees for SNAP?
So our fees are kind of wrapped in together, right? So it's difficult to isolate the SNAP versus the credit card fees because we have one terminal that we use for both. Our credit card agreement is very convoluted, right? So digging through and looking, it looks like our terminal charge, if we were just running EBT cards, would be around $100 a month. So we're not being charged transaction fees for EBT, but it's just that wireless terminal. So we don't have a place where we can plug into like the internet, right? So I know that our platform is a different fee structure than if somebody actually had that hardwire connection. So with that, and then also tokens are a fee, right, or a charge. So we purchased our tokens through a website called Promote Source. And that was in 2018 was the last time we purchased those tokens. It looks like they're still offering them. And right now it's about $430 for 3,000 tokens. When we started, at that time, we had purchased 3,500 tokens, and we're still circulating most of those. So we're not having too much of a loss yet, anyway. So
I was wondering what you have done to really get the word out, and what you've seen maybe during the pandemic of anyone shifting their habits potentially at the market.
As far as our marketing, right, that we do at the market, it's not as robust as it could be. All right, I'll be the first person to say that. We typically do posters and we do handbills, and on those posters, the market posters, we say right on there, not only that we accept the SNAP EBT, but we also have our information for Double Up Food Bucks, right? So on the posters that go around the community, as well as the handbills, that language is there. It's also on our website, it's on our Facebook page, and then we try to do specific promotions or boost posts on Facebook that are around SNAP and EBT each year. Really what we find is word of mouth is really the best way to get that information out there. And having not running credit cards this year at market, it's been interesting. And I'll share a story that I shared with you all last week, right? That there were people coming to our market information booth because they're used to using their credit card there. And our messaging, of course, is unfortunately this year because of COVID, we're not doing that, but we have a sign up that says, but we are processing EBT and SNAP this year. And they're like, oh, well, I'll just use my SNAP card. And she's like, I've never used it here before. And so it was interesting that she was a regular customer and she just didn't happen to have cash on her. And she was like, oh, well, then I'll just use my EBT card. And so I think having that platform, having that community, and kind of just talking to people while they're at market, making sure they know what the program is. And a lot of people walking through our market area will mention something about, oh, well, I know my sister, I'll have to make sure she knows that she can use her EBT card here. I think something else that's interesting is, I don't know all the background about it, and you all may be able to share more about it, but with what's happening with the pandemic and the free and reduced lunch, I know that there are families, right? Their kiddos were eligible for free and reduced lunch. So their families are actually getting essentially EBT cards for a certain amount based on the number of children they have. And it's separate from that SNAP program, right? So they have a separate card just for kind of their free and reduced lunch value that the state's providing them. And so then we've been noticing an increase of individuals using those cards at market too, which I think is really interesting and a great program. So again, word of mouth is really great. And I'm sure there are lots of other great ways. And the idea of having that sponsorship or that partnership with someone really focused in on that program would really help disseminate information even greater. So a question about that terminal fee, is that something the market covers out of their revenue? Yes, so that's based on, so our market is funded purely based off of vendor stall fees, right? So that goes into our income bucket, and then that's an expense that we pay from the stall fees that we get each year, if that makes sense. So it's not something that we pass on, right? It's just something that we pay through our income. Our stall fees per week or season, so it's super convoluted, guys. So our stall fees for our vendors, it depends on what type of vendor they are and how big their stall is, right? And I would be happy, I can definitely send our rules and regulations to Aubrey, if that would be helpful to see. But, and also it depends on if you're a weekly or you're a seasonal vendor. So a weekly vendor that's a farmer, just to give you an example, it's about $31 a week for market for a standard size. And if you were a seasonal vendor, it depends on your stall size, but it's closer to maybe around 19-ish per week, right? If you were to kind of divvy out the math, just kind of give you a rough idea. So that's our lowest category, but then we have concessionaires and non-farmer processors and things like that as well. So it's definitely, I think we have maybe 9 different prices depending on the category and the stall size and if you're weekly or seasonal. So
yeah, if anybody ever is in Lincoln on a Sunday, you should take a field trip there for sure.
It's great to have you all on and learn a bit more about your markets and some of the challenges and successes you're having this year. And as we've mentioned a few times, we are, Margaret and Erin and I and our colleague Skylar, who from Buy Fresh Buy Local couldn't join us tonight, happy to help. Please feel free to reach out if you have further questions or want to chat about your own market in depth. As you think about kind of implementing SNAP, there's lots of moving parts there, obviously, and so we're here to help with the funding and all those kind of parts of it. So don't hesitate to contact us at any time.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, shout out to Jen. Thank you so much for being here and sharing that real world example with us.
thanks for having me. I had a great time.